Hello again. This week we're going to look at something that's slightly more serious, slightly more important for people, and they've asked me about it, which is antique silver which contains ivory. And a lot of you will already know that, and this, I have to be clear because you'll be watching this worldwide, this only applies within the UK at the moment, the regulations I'm talking about, but the Ivory Act was passed in 2018 and then came into force about a year and a half ago. And it's a more stringent policy which has made a lot of items in the UK that are genuine antiques illegal to sell, or you need to do things to sell them. So I'm going to talk you through a few things I've got to give you examples. If you want the whole bells and whistles regulation, you can go on the government website and look for ivory under DEFRA or AFA, and it will list everything. It'll take you quite some time to work through it, and you may not understand it at the first go. Believe me, it's taken me a few times to get my head around it. And even now, people in our industry that talk about it do make mistakes when they're talking about it. So I'll try to put a few of those right. The first thing I want to show you, which I bought, all of these things I bought quite legally many years ago, is this. And this is pretty fabulous. Excuse the reflections. All you see is dirty polishing rags in the reflections. This is an Art Deco caster, and what a caster. You know, a lot of you might be looking at this now, the educated ones, and thinking, oh, he's got a H.G. Murphy caster. Well, I haven't actually. And I know who designed this and made this only because I've had exactly this caster before when I worked at an auction house in the north of England. One came in exactly this pattern and form. This one is marked, rather confusingly, London 1934. There, but it's the maker's mark, which is actually the retailer's mark in this case, is for Finnegan's of Manchester, who were luggage fitters and retailers and had a big shop there. And the fact that this is assayed in London is quite misleading as well, because the other example I saw was actually marked by the maker, and that was J.B. Harrison and Sons Limited. Which may not sound like a big name to you, but J.B. Harrison, the son, was quite a gifted designer. And I think you can tell all of this is hand done, by the way. I'm sure they machined, this is spun, this is a spun body, but it's heavy. It's a very heavy gauge. It knew it would have all of this engraving on it, and it would take it, and it's very much in a Murphy style. You've got this fabulous conical. I mean, look at the shape of that. And all this movement that's always typical of the very best Art Deco silver. People think I hate 20th century design, and I don't. I love it, actually. I love this caster. What I detest is mass-produced stuff that not much thought has gone into. And unfortunately, as techniques and industrialisation takes on, you get much more of that in the 20th century than you do in the 18th century, and that's the only reason for that. I'm not a monster. Well, not all the time. And you can even see how well this is finished. It's got this lovely little nut all the way down there, and it just fits. There's a tiny little line around there where it's been so well made that the nut just fits in the cover. It's just made a tiny little line where they've tightened it, probably with an implement, to affix that. Now, that is the problem. It's integral, in my view, to the object. It makes it. The whole of this would not work without that. But that, sadly, is carved ivory. Now, fortunately, there are a series of minor exemptions for antiques. This falls under the de minimis exemption, which basically says that if An antique object is altogether period and genuine, with no added parts or alterations. If it has less than 10% ivory, and it dates before 1947, actually the 3rd of March 1947, you can sell it. You do, however, have to register it with DEFRA for a fee of £20 currently. At the point of recording, of course, they can always, like most government things, they can always increase that as time goes by. And I'm sure they will. If you're watching this 10 or 15 years in the future, you'll be thinking, oh, it was only £20. But a £20 fee for a one-off transaction before you get too excited. So were I to sell this to you, which I wouldn't do because I love it, I would have to pay them £20. But then if you wanted to sell it again, you would have to pay them £20. And the person that bought it off you, if they wanted to sell it again, they would have to pay them £20. So very quickly, in the lifetime of an object, the fees that are appended to it, and this is worth probably about £500 or £600 as it stands, because it's such a good one. If it were Murphy, most of you know that this would be £1,200, £1,500, £1,800 if it was Murphy. It's only £500 or £600 because it's by J.B. Harrison, and he's not very well known, but he's just as bloody good. But over the lifetime of an antique, that fee will discourage the sale of these items. And unfortunately, and this is where I become combative, and I know lots of people will disagree with me, this is where dealers are tempted to just remove that. And I'm afraid it happens a lot. It happens, I'm sad to say, hundreds of times a day. Bits of ripped off antiques, very sadly. Brings a tear to the eye, but they're the owners, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. And if you financially incentivize the removal and the destruction of antiques, that's what will happen. But that's one example. I can see we're going to have to do this in two parts. That's one example of a piece of silver which has a small ivory element. It's still legal to sell it. It's got to be, remember, under 10% by volume of the object, and you can't count the inside of objects. You can't count vacant spaces, I'm afraid. And it has to be made prior to 1947. Now I'm going to show you something else. And I love this too. It's in a box. We like things in their original boxes. This is a pretty fantastic silver cake knife, I think, possibly even made for a wedding, because it's very unusual just to get a single knife like this in a box, unless it's for a special occasion. And I think in this case, it's to cut somebody's wedding cake. It was intended for that. We've got, it's marked on the blade, but we've got the retailer and the maker's name in the cover, which is the Artificers Guild of London, 4 Conduit Street, London. And this is marked for London RS 1912. This came up at an auction when the impending Ivory Act was coming in, but not yet law. So the auctioneers had put this in, this fabulous arts and crafts cake knife, very cheaply indeed, because it has, unfortunately, an ivory handle. Still legal to sell it at that point. The previous law stated that if any object dated before 1947 and you could prove it, which of course you can with hallmarks, it was fine to sell it, whether it had 10% ivory or 50% or 100% ivory. It did, as long as it was before 1947, which was a very sensible and grown-up way to do it, which we've now abandoned, unfortunately. But at the time, this was legal to sell. The auctioneers put it in at £30, which, if anybody knows anything about Artificers Guild work and the rarity of it and just the sublime nature of that knife in its original fitted case in pristine condition would know it was a come and get me estimate, but they did it because they were worried nobody would want to buy it with the laws coming in. I viewed it, honestly, because I could afford it at the time, I viewed it as possibly my last opportunity to purchase something like this. And I think it cost me £400 or £500 on the day. And well worth it. What then, you ask, now that the Ivory Act is law, is it worth today? It is worthless. Unfortunately, if any of you are out there looking at this, thinking, I would love to own that, I can never sell it to you. I can give it to you freely. I don't want to do that. Well, not at the moment. I will do one day. But I can never sell it. There is a law that says that if an item is over 10% of volume of ivory, and it dates not prior 1947, and this is where a lot of people slip up, but for this exceptional exemption, if it dates before 1918, you can submit it for an exceptional exemption. That, unfortunately, does not cost £20. The submission process for that is £230, which is non-refundable and may be refused. So you can submit an object and say it is of national importance or extreme artistic merit or historical significance. You submit that, you pay your £230, and in 3/4 of the cases it's been approved, but in 25% of the cases last year it was simply refused, and you don't get your money back. The problem in this instance is at the moment it simply would not be worth, even if I could get the exceptional exemption for it at £230, then the other £20 to register it, so £250 in total. If I knew I would get it, if somebody said to me, you will definitely get it for that fabulous wedding knife because it's a rare and important thing, Michael, which it probably isn't. It's rare, but it's probably not important enough. It still wouldn't be worth it. I still wouldn't get £750 for it, or I might just get it. So there's a financial disincentive there, unfortunately. So objects like this, where they're over 10%, unless they're fabulously rare and valuable, and you're going to go to the trouble to register them, these are illegal to sell. Now, I've gone on a little bit. I want to show you maybe one or two more things first. So we'll stop it there, and I'll see you in part 2 of this contentious issue.